need to share something with you. Pastor Mike. I've been working with him for some time. I think he but that's going to be between you and I. I'm not even sure that it's correct. So don't quote me on that. And since I've got your attention, I just want to share something else with you. It's just between you and I. So, you can't tell anybody that I'm telling you this. Pastor George preached a message in a That's our secret, though. Do not tell anybody. Because if they don't see the video, they'll never know, but I was there. I saw it. And listen, I got a prayer request too. I need to share a prayer request with you. When Pastor Tim approached me about doing this basketball video, I was concerned, knowing that I represent the SEC. That's the home of basketball. Could the young guys keep up? But here's my prayer request. When he was So I just want to lift him up in prayer right now. And I'm just going to ask you, don't share this prayer request with anybody else. You know how that goes. It's a prayer request. So let's keep that between just me and you. And all the things I've said, please don't quote me on them. They could be true, they may not be true, but that's kind of how it goes. So thanks for coming today. This will be our little secret. You saw a portion, just the backdrop for those of you that are guests today. We cut this video of the 4 pastors here playing basketball together. We had a blast. I could hardly walk the next day after we played basketball. It was so much fun though. And what we're doing is really leveraging this time of the year. How many of you are basketball fans in the room? So you know what I'm talking about. It's March Madness, one of my favorite. This is like a holiday for me. And I get to take this Thursday and Friday off, and my wife will have special meals prepared for me, and we'll just and we're going to enjoy March Madness. I love this time of the year, and looking forward to it. How many of you think your team's going to make the tournament? How many of you, your team is already out? You know they're done. All right. How many of you just don't give a rip? You could care less. This will be you and the 3 of us can talk today. We're basketball fans. I know Sheriff is a big Kentucky Wildcat. They play at 1 today. And listen, University of Buffalo is going to make the tournament this year. They got selected yesterday by winning their tournament. First time in the history of UB. They're called UB. The church where I used to pastor was just down the road from UB campus, and a lot of the professors and staff and all came. Matter of fact, let me tell you a cool story about UB. One of the professors at UB, great friend of mine, matter of fact, you could watch these services, I don't know, but he's the chair of a department there, a huge basketball fan. He's a graduate of Duke, which Duke has a basketball program. They're like JV compared to the SEC. But they've got a basketball program at Duke, and he is like this massive Duke fan. And back in 2007, when I was living in Buffalo with our family, Buffalo hosted the first round of the tournament. and Duke was going to play in the first round. Everybody came out in support. It was like Buffalo turned over to be like this massive Duke community. I don't know what that was all about. And so he kind of rallied everybody to be in support of Duke, and they played this small school called Virginia Commonwealth, or VCU as they're called commonly. And first round, it was like one of the biggest upsets of all time. Everybody that wore Duke on that Sunday at church, everybody was wearing black and gold in honor of VCU. He was so mad. It was hysterical though, and we had a lot of fun. I love basketball. I love this time of year. One of the things I love about March Madness and basketball, which we've kind of got our Sweet 16 bracket up here we're going to talk about a little bit. One of the things I love is I like the trash talk that takes place on a basketball floor. Some of you know I used to officiate basketball. I worked in the SEC. That was my primary conference, and I loved officiating basketball and had a lot of fun with it. But at the college level, it's really kept under wraps pretty good. Once you get to the professional level, it's a little different game, and I never officiated at that level. But basketball at any level, whether you're refereeing small elementary age kids all the way through the middle school, high school level, some of the greatest basketball games I ever officiated were middle school games. When those rivals would play each other, and all the kids, they'd play during school, and all the school kids would come in. They were just fun. Matter of fact, my brother and I were officiating. I had already started working at the collegiate level, and we were living in Jacksonville at the time, and my brother was officiating, and we got called to do like the championship game for Jacksonville. And it was 2 middle schools. In middle school there, it was 2 ninth graders. So 2 ninth grade teams were going to play each other. Gym was packed. It was rocking. These 2 schools didn't like each other. And I got punched by a coach in the game. Yeah, I'll tell you that story some other day. And literally, this is how we responded. I couldn't believe it just happened. And I walked over to the scores table, and I wrote down 2-0. Packed my bags, and my brother and I walked out of the gym, and we played no basketball. I got booed the whole way out to the parking lot, and we did not play a basketball game that day after that. So that tells you a little bit about referees and what they go through. So I was not planning to I didn't tell that story in the first service. But yeah, I love basketball. This is just a fun time of year. How many of you know who Larry Bird is? Okay. He's like one of the all-time famous trash talkers. This guy, there was a game when I was in high school. I loved the Celtics. I was one of those kids at nighttime, whatever sport it was I was playing, the lights would be on. I'd be outside shooting hoops, and I'd talk, I'm Larry Bird shooting the last second shot. There was a game where he was playing against a guy named Xavier McDaniel of the Supersonics, Seattle Supersonics. And the game was on the line, and Bird, the trash talker that he was, he goes over to the huddle of the other team, Chief. He goes to the Seattle huddle, and he says to Xavier, who's been guarding him the whole game, and he says to Xavier McDaniel, "Hey, dude, I'm taking the last shot." And Xavier McDaniel, the whole team just kind of looks up at Bird. Bird walks back over to his huddle, says to the coach, "Hey, coach, give me the ball. I'm taking the last shot." So as soon as they break from the huddle, he looks at Xavier McDaniel, and they're just kind of trash talking, and he points and he says, "I'm taking the shot right there. I'm going to bury it from right there. We're going to beat you guys today. I'm going to take the shot right there." And sure as the world, they do everything they can. Bird catches the ball from that spot, shoots it. Celtics win the game. And Xavier McDaniel turns around to his coach and is like, "What am I supposed to do?" Trash talk is kind of part of the game. Some of you, maybe you've heard of this guy, Reggie Miller from the NBA, and he has this famous choke signal that he would do when they'd play the New York Knicks. So he's kind of one of the famous trash talkers from the NBA. But maybe my highlight trash talk was when the Chicago Bulls, any Chicago Bull fans? A couple of you. Chicago Bulls, they had another player that was really great named Scottie Pippen. This was not a reference to Jordan. But here's Scottie Pippen playing against the mailman, that's his nickname, Karl Malone, who was considered, he's an NBA Hall of Famer. He's in the Hall of Fame. One of the great things Karl Malone was known for was his ability as a big man to shoot free throws. He just could make free throws. Everybody knew when the mailman, whatever they called him that, I don't know, but when they put the mailman on the free throw line, he was known for making it. In the NBA Finals, this is the NBA Finals, those two teams are playing each other. Game 6 is on the line, 6 seconds left in the game. Some of you might remember this. There's a timeout. The Bulls are up by a point to win the world championship. Scottie Pippen has fouled Karl Malone. The teams go to their respective timeouts. Malone's going to go to the free throw line. All he has to do is sink both free throws, and they're going to win the game. Make sense? As soon as they break from their timeout, Scottie Pippen walks by Karl Malone, the mailman, kind of pats him on the rear end and says, "Hey, the mail ain't delivered on a Sunday." And Malone just kind of looks at Scottie Pippen like, "Are you kidding me? You just said that," because it was a Sunday game, the mailman, all that. And sure as the world, he misses both free throws, and the Chicago Bulls won the world championship. So trash talk is kind of part of the game. Matter of fact, when our staff got together and we were playing, we were trash talking each other. We started out, I think it was me and Pastor Mike against Pastor Tim and Pastor George. And then that game, we got so exhausted, we sat down, drank some water. And then we decided to switch up teams, and it was kind of, they trash talked us a little bit, like there's the young guys against the old guys. You know who won. Yeah, we beat them pretty silly. And we just had fun with it. I like the trash talk side of it. It's just fun. But you know what's amazing? And I know a number of you probably played at some level of athletics. There's something unique about athletics where trash talk can happen, but you've got most of the time, not always, most of the time you can walk away, still shake the opponent's hand. That's called sportsmanship. You shake their hand and you just kind of go. I mean, you're a high-level athlete here in the community playing softball, and you've got your rivals where you guys play against each other. I know your school played our school when my daughter played, but at the end of the day, you shake hands and it's called sportsmanship. So trash talk in real live language like us, because we're not on a basketball court today, we're going to go home and we're going to have lunch, we're going to go to a restaurant, we're going to go to jobs, we're going to interact with people. Trash talk can oftentimes turn into another thing. Now, let me illustrate it this way. When we began putting this particular series together for March Madness, here's kind of how my brain was thinking. Today, at 6 o'clock, they start announcing all the teams. There'll be 64 teams. 27, by the way, have already earned a bid. So there'll be a number of teams come into the bracket tonight. And they'll start filling out 64. Now, you're only seeing 16. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. This is called the Sweet 16 bracket. This will actually be 2 weekends from now. And you can tell, I love it. I'm into it. So next weekend, there'll be 64 teams selected. And it's a really cool deal. It's a great tournament. In your bulletin, we've given you the chance. If you want to sign up and compete, listen, we're going to compete. You can select. I've been doing this since I was a kid with my dad, my brothers. We all do it. So you can go on in the bulletin. We've given you how to go on and compete. At the end of it, whoever gets the most teams right, I'll take you to a meal, and we'll go to Hardee's. So if you've ever been wanting to go to Hardee's, we'll have some fun at Hardee's. And I know that's your chance, so sign up so I can take you to Hardee's. We'll just have a great time selecting, and you don't have to know a lot about basketball. You don't have to have what I call basketball IQ. So listen, if you just like picking them by team color, you can do that. If you like picking them by mascot, just pick them. That's how my wife does it. She just selects mascots. Hey, I like this mascot better than this mascot. So just pick them and see if you can come up, because here's where the real tournament starts. All of it's the tournament. But once they get to the Final Four, it's a big deal. I mean, the Final Four, this is the mecca of athletic events once they get to the Final Four. And it's going to be really cool. Matter of fact, after the first service today, a number of folks told me that they were actually going to be going to the first round games, and they told me where they were going to some of the games. And if anybody's got extra tickets, I'm off. I can go. So if I'm not here next Sunday, somebody else preach. I'm at a basketball game. Final Four is really the cool deal. So here's what I did. I began saying to our team, what are the things that we all struggle with? And let me just throw my hat in this game too. The areas of life we all struggle with. Man, you just start rattling down and putting down all these things we all struggle with. And then I started playing them against each other. Well, lust versus greed, who would win? What's more difficult? And I played them out, and what I discovered was in my Final Four, one of those would be pride. And so I listed that last Sunday. Pride is an issue that every one of us in this room have to battle. In some way or another, we have to battle this. Some of your remarks and emails and comments to me over the last week as a result of our conversation about pride last week were really encouraging. Thank you. And how God's using that conversation in you. But as I processed through this and I came down, I actually had this word somewhere around here. I had the word fear right here because I think a lot of people deal with fear in your life. And how you process fear and how it plays its way out. Well, it processed out to trash talking. I'm going to give you kind of the Christian term for trash talking. Gossip. That's kind of the Christian term, if you will. I think this is an issue a lot of people have to deal with. Now, today, I'm going to talk predominantly to kind of the church, if you will. And if you're not a member of this church, you're exempt from this because I think this hits all of us. But for those that hear today, it's really about this issue of gossip. Because gossip is something that I think in all of our lives impacts us. You know, if I were to stand up here and say, boy, I've never gossiped about somebody, guess what would be on my final four list? Lying. Yeah. I wish I could tell you that that's never happened. It's just not true. There's times that I've given in to saying something or something about somebody. And maybe you've experienced that. So I listed it as one of our final four, pride and gossip. So if I can, let's talk for a few minutes about this topic of gossip. I think it's a really important topic. And I know for first responders today, I shared with Sheriff Borders, I didn't select this message because it was First Responder Sunday. It just kind of, we were doing First Responder Sunday and we mapped this out and it just happened to land today. So this isn't, you're not hearing a message geared at first responders at all. But if it's applicable and you're a first responder, I hope it encourages you. I hope it helps you. Because I do think this is a really, really big deal. Here's what I want you to know. There's another term that maybe the Bible uses, and some of you are familiar with the Bible, maybe some of you aren't. There's another term because gossip interchangeably is another term, and I'm just going to write that term. I'll write it up here. It's going to be a little small. God uses the term tongue, if you can read my writing up there, tongue. Over 10 times in the New Testament, God refers to the damage the tongue, gossip, can have in relationships. Matter of fact, more specifically than just referencing it, you know what those 10 references are to? They destroy or kill relationships. Now, if we took a pulse of this room and just said, hey, I just want to know the pulse of the people in the room, nobody wants broken relationship, whether that's marital, with your children if you're a parent, or with your parents if you're a child, or with your siblings, or with a coworker, or with a team. None of us want broken relationship, and yet many in this room are living lives right now with broken relationship. Why? Because of the tongue or gossip. Does that make sense? Are you kind of connecting there? Does that make sense? And listen, there's no condemnation here from me to you. Let's just talk intelligently as a group of people that want to solve some of this issue, because pride is an issue, gossip can be an issue in all of our lives. Here's kind of one of the ways that I would describe this to you. The tongue, and if you've got a bulletin and you want to follow along and fill in notes, this is one of those spots. The tongue can be an outward indicator of an internal, did you catch this? Of an internal sickness. Think of it this way. I had to go to the doctor this week, and I was going for something unrelated. You know what the doctor did? It was a female, and she unwrapped this little piece of paper, and it had this wooden stick in it, and she said, open up your mouth. And she put that really good tasting wooden stick on my tongue. I just couldn't get enough of that stick. I wanted to eat it. It was so good. And she said to me, say ah. And I did. What was she doing? She was trying to look at my tongue, my mouth, my throat as an indicator of what's going on in my body. Does that make sense? Think of it this way. You're going to love this connection. This is how God describes gossip for you and I. Gossip isn't, or our tongue is an indicator of something spiritual going on in our lives. It's really a condition of our heart. You know how I know that? As I'm processing through this, if I come back from the Final Four to this is called the Elite Eight, 2, 4, 6, 8 teams at the Elite Eight. One of these is judgmental spirit. Or I'll just put down here. Oh man, my marker's giving out. I want you to be able to see this. This is huge. This is going to help so many of you. It's a condition of the heart. See, what's going on in your heart, and if we talk from a medical perspective, when our heart is damaged, when our heart is clogged, the rest of our body's off kilter. Spiritually, when our heart's out of whack, it manifests itself in gossip. When your heart is judgmental and critical towards another individual, it will always come out on the tongue. Isn't that interesting? We kind of go, well, Pastor, there's no way for us to solve. People are just going to be people. They're just going to talk about one another. And it doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. If we took individual ownership and said, okay, I'm struggling, I can't stop talking about other people, then just process back one rung. What's going on in your heart? What is it that you've become critical, judgmental of that's impacted the heart to cause you to have this critical spirit? Because if your critical spirit goes unchecked, and your critical spirit, your heart is unhealthy, what's going to manifest itself in the poison of the words we use. And I just want to say to you as a church and as my friends, by the time that your and my judgmental spirit comes out from our heart onto our lips, relationships get hurt. And I got a whole lot of relationships in my life. A whole lot of relationships that I don't want to see damaged, but in an instant could be damaged because of something I could say or they could say. But I think this is foreign to our culture. I really do. I think this is counterintuitive to the culture we live in. I'm going to give you an illustration of that. I'm not a big fan of this, so don't go home and go, oh, Pastor Dave recommended this website, so this must be good stuff. There is a website called TMZ. You ever heard of this place? Yeah. Maybe you've seen the television show. TMZ is making millions and millions of dollars by gossiping. That's what the whole thing is geared. Now, by the very fact that I just said that, it could be labeled as gossip. My heart is not to gossip about TMZ. I'm just helping you to see the illustration here. Our culture is driven to want to know the dirt on other people. It's sad, but that's kind of what we've come to. And so how are we going to deal with this? Because gossip sells. Politically. I mean, you run for office?
Yes, sir.
I was voted in as a pastor here. It's not political, but there was a vote taken. Maybe you're in a position where there's people that weigh in on your employment. You know how quickly it is to rip somebody's reputation apart? All it takes is one person who has a judgmental, critical heart and spirit towards that individual to plant a couple of seeds, whether it's right or it's wrong. It happens, and pretty soon, the gossip wheel starts to spin. And people that don't know right from wrong, or they don't know if it's true or not true, they're not sure how to handle it. You know what people will do? They just distance themselves. By the way, for those of you that don't go to church, let me just tell you, there's not a church in all of Lake County that's a perfect church. Well, I stopped going to church because of all the hypocrites. Oh, really? Every one of us are going to do things that are wrong. Church is a place to heal and figure out ways to reconcile that. Amen. That's really what we try to do here. So, now there again, this isn't me pounding you. This is us in the same ship, rowing the oars together, because this is an issue that, if going unchecked, can hurt and damage a lot of relationships. It can hurt a town, a city, a community. And pretty soon, we hear this phrase, well, can I just tell with you, because of social media really, I think, has brought this to light. Can I just remind you that whoever gossips to you will gossip about you? Amen. Well, show me that one in the Bible. Oh, okay. 1 David chapter 10, verse 1. There's no such book. Listen, whoever gossips to you, you need to know they're going to gossip about you. That should put your radar up. You know what happens oftentimes? I think we've got lead-in lines now. That's why you saw the video. There's lead-in lines like, hey, I need some advice on how to handle, and we mention the person's name and their sin. Hey, Rudy, could you give me some advice? I just need to know how to handle Paul's, and we list to Rudy Paul's sin. And pretty soon we've gossiped about Paul. Rudy didn't need to know what's going on with Paul. Or we've got a lead-in line like, hey, I just want to share with you something in confidence. This is just you and I. That's why you saw the video that way. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, so don't quote me on this, but... And then we say something. Or how about this classic Christian line? Can I share a prayer request with you? Let me tell you about Al. And pretty soon, maybe we share something about Al. Whether it's true or not, let's be careful here. Sometimes we justify because we know it to be true, so we share it. It's still gossip. Please know that. And so we've got these lead-in lines that we think we can justify. Well, let's just pray about it. Or, hey, I need some clarity. What we're doing is we're jockeying for position. We're trying to posture ourselves better than someone else, which, by the way, comes back to fear. At the root of gossip is going to always be some sense of fear. Maybe we justify it this way with this lead-in line. I'm just so old, you can't teach an old dog a new trick. It's just who I am. Then stop being that person. Well, we don't need a bunch of gossips. When I say we, I'm talking South Point, Leesburg, Lake County. What we need is the church to take a stand and put a zip on our gossip and end that junk and move on. And let the church lead out in that regard. Paul, the apostle, said it in this incredible way when he said in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 4, though some tongues just love the taste of gossip, those who follow Jesus have better uses for language than that. Isn't that good? This is from the Message translation. Did you catch that? Some tongues just love the taste of gossip. Maybe your mind right now is thinking of that person that every time you're together, they're giving the inside scoop. They're trash talking. Those people who follow Jesus, which should be pretty much everybody in this room, we should have a better language than that. See, our language has got to be one that communicates hope and love and encouragement, life and value. When we spread the cancer of gossip, we're eliminating the ability for the cure of love. And the deadly disease of gossip takes over in relationship. And the fatal words that flow out of a mouth They are simply a reflection of a judgmental heart. That's why when we talk about, well, you can't teach an old dog a new trick. We can. If we'll just do what God's asked us to do a checkup on our heart, get rid of that judgmental spirit, stop living in fear, we can start to end this gossip and those lead-in lines. Well, how do you do this? Here's how I think you do that. I'm going to kind of give you kind of a help today. Now, it's going to be one simple thing. I think there's many, but I'm going to give you one simple thing. And I'm just going to use Ephesians, what Paul wrote in the book, to a letter to a group of people in Ephesus in the New Testament. And he said in Ephesians chapter 5, he said, and it's one simple phrase, be thankful. And really, the gist of this is be thankful in all areas of our life, but we're going to make it applicable to be thankful for people. Oh, well, you don't know, and you name that person. Well, let me ask you, are you thankful for people? Or do people rub you the wrong way? Do people just tick you off? I mean, do people just frustrate you? I mean, would you rather just lock yourself in a room and hope you never see anybody else again? I mean, just tired of dealing with people? You ever feel that way? Now, I've never felt that way. Let's just put lying up. I'm there. There's times you just want to go, come on. Maybe you've been there where you just want to go, come on, man. See, what happens is there's a condition in the heart manifests itself. A sick heart comes out on the tongue in the form of gossip. And we become judgmental about someone else. And the sad part is we try to justify doing it. If you're a leader in the room, I probably don't have to tell you, this isn't a leadership class for you today, but I lead as well in our organization. Leaders have to learn to control our tongues. I used the phrase this week with some friends. I'm going to choose in this conversation to swallow the bullets. That was the phrase I used this week. Because sometimes I've got more information as a leader, and I could fire off a bullet that could hurt someone else and their reputation and their character and fire back and defend my position. And a wise pastor friend of mine named Pastor Al, now in his 70s, said to me, David, you're going to have to learn to eat the bullets. I hope that resonates with all of our law enforcement today. Because there are times where all of us may have more information, be able to contribute to the conversation, defend a position. Someone has planted a seed, someone has said something, there's a write-up in the paper, there's a news article, there's something that's been said, and I want to challenge us, sometimes you just got to eat the bullets. So, are you thankful for people? Or do you just pick them apart? Do you critique everything they wear? The way they fix their hair? Maybe you walked in today and you turned to your spouse and said, can you believe she did her hair like that? Can you believe, listen, if that happened, praise God you're here today. Can you believe they wore that outfit? Can you believe that person is in church? I mean, you might be sitting in here and there's a law enforcement officer that pulled you over last week. And they're looking at you right now going, they go to South Point? They don't. They're a guest today. They're just visiting today. See, what happens is we get aggravated with people, we get a judgmental spirit, and it manifests itself in gossip. And man, I just want to tell you, it really becomes one of the final 4 really difficult things we're going to have to deal with in life. Some of you have been on the opposite end of gossip. Maybe you've heard something like, you're ugly. You got a big nose. You're overweight. You've got 4 eyes. For all the kids in the room, I got to use this word. I'm sorry. Maybe you've heard you're stupid. Maybe you've been the recipient of that growing up. Maybe it's been years since you've heard it, but you resonate with that. Maybe it's as fresh as yesterday. And that's the language that you hear. And we talked about it with Pride last week. It takes about 12 positive words of affirmation in somebody's life to overcome one critical comment. About 12. And what can happen all too quickly is these phrases that are said to us, we begin to internalize them, and you know what happens? We start to get a critical spirit. And what do? We manifest that with gossip. And for those of you that hear these types of comments, maybe you're confused today. How can God be a God of love? How can God's story be one of reconciliation when all I've grown up hearing from my spouse or from my kids or from my mom and my dad is how I'm no good, I have no value? Or maybe you heard these words. Your dad and I had hoped we would have a little boy, but we had you. Or we hoped we had had a little girl. We already had 3 little girls. We didn't want a 4th, and you were an accident. I mean, you know how damaging and hurtful that can be. So you're here today, and you've experienced that. Listen, there are too many people in this world today that are engaging in conduct that is just not becoming of a follower of Jesus Christ. Now, whatever your persuasion is here today on how you feel about the church and Jesus, I want you to hear me unequivocally say, I am a Jesus follower. My entire life is wanting to be more like Him. And I want to tell you, there's times I blow it. There's times I engage and I am not who I should be. But I try to live my life according to a principle someone shared with me years ago from Ephesians 5, and it says, be an imitator of Christ. If I can just be an imitator of Him, man, remember that woman that he found that was having an adulterous affair and had numerous, and some guys pulled her out by her hair, and there she is in front of everybody? What was his response? It wasn't a condemning, let me go tell the whole community about you. Hey, who's got the first stone? Pick it up and throw it first. And everybody drops their stone and walks away. So, here's my prayer for you today. It would be from Psalm 141, verse 3. Here's my desire for you. Here's what Scripture says, and I just think this is the value right here. It says, set a guard over your mouth. Or, speaking to the Lord, as the psalmist said, set a guard over my mouth, O Lord, and keep watch over the door of my lips. Isn't that good? I mean, if we could practice that in this community, think of the impact and the difference we could make rather than to engage today at Oakwood in that conversation. Man, did the pastor not see how many hands went up that we really don't care about basketball? What's his problem? I'm the guy with the microphone. That's the problem. I'm just trying to help you see a simple illustration that I think this is a really big deal in all of our lives. You may not be battling this. You may not deal with this. You may go, you know what, pride's a non-issue for me. I hope you're there. Maybe your final 4 is fear. Maybe you live in constant fear. Just stick with me here. If we could solve this issue of taming the tongue, remember what James, the half-brother of Jesus, said about the tongue? The tongue is capable of an inferno. What does that mean? What does that mean? All of our fire guys, you know what that means. An inferno is an out-of-control blaze of fire that's uncontrollable. And James, the half-brother of Jesus, said that's what our tongue's capable of doing in relationship. Creating a firestorm that gets out of control. So today, my prayer and my desire is Psalm 141, verse 3 to you, that you will set a guard over your mouth and allow the Lord to put a hedge of protection at the very door of your lips. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and here's how I want to close out by asking you 3 questions. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to write it down. Nobody's turning anything into me. I want you to answer these internally. Before we let a word come out of our mouth, I want you to ask these 3 questions. Number 1, is what I'm about to say true? I want you to think about this. You know why I think this is important? Because I think people in general have a way of spinning truth. Sometimes we tell just a portion of the truth and we leave the rest up to someone else to fill in the blanks. Well, that's a tough spot to be. That's a dangerous place to live. If that's where you live, you constantly just give a little bit of the truth and you leave the rest questionable, I want to encourage you, man, you're doing nothing but hurting people. So is what you're about to say about this person true? One of our new deacons, Rudy, I'll use him as an example. Is what I'm about to say to you as a church about Rudy true? Rudy has on blue jeans. Is it true? Yeah, he's got on blue jeans. Let me just tell you, I don't think any guy should wear blue jeans. I think they're of the Antichrist. You'd never catch me in a pair of jeans. Okay, that's why lying is on the board. Listen, it doesn't matter if it's true or not. Here's why, because question 2 becomes so important. You ready for question 2? Check it out. Is what I'm about to say helpful? If I tell you that Rudy wears blue jeans and I don't care for blue jeans, does that really help you in how you view Rudy? Does it help Rudy in any way? No. Is what I'm about to say helpful? Because what can happen in our lives is we can land on the first one, what I'm about to say is true. And you know what happens? We want to stop right there and justify why we've gossiped about somebody because it was true. Please, come on, don't go there. Just because it's true, was it helpful? You say, well, come on, Pastor, where does that even fit in? Because what Scripture teaches us is that our tongue is capable of building people up and it's capable of robbing and stripping away. How many people in this room, you've had your reputation damaged because someone said something about you that was true? And this is a room full of people that struggle with gossip and pride and lying. Why? Because we're people. We're people made up with this DNA called sin. We've got a sin nature. Man, well, nobody wants to talk about sin nature, but it's who we are. So we've got to figure out as followers of Christ, or those that are kicking the tires on this whole thing called church and Christianity, if you're kicking the tires today on it, checking it out, let me encourage you. This is a place, and this isn't the only church in town, by the way, that's a great Bible teaching church. There's some great Bible teaching churches in town. I am a fan of the church in general. Now, am I partial to South Point? I am. This is where I lead, and I love our folks here, but I recognize we're not it. We're not the only show in town. But I will say about this particular place, we want to be a people that are authentic imitators of Christ. And do we fail at times? Yes. But let's work through that. And how do we do that? By checking. Do we have a judgmental spirit? So when we're going to talk about somebody, is what I'm about to say true? Is it helpful? And then thirdly, is what I'm about to say kind? I chose this word here, kind, because it really is a reflection of a principle that I started 20 plus years ago. I was a youth pastor. I was talking to somebody this week. Our church ran about, the first church I youth pastored in, we were averaged about 90 to 100 people in church. And our youth ministry averaged about 60 kids in youth ministry. And so when you came into our church, there would be 90 people spread around. And all the teenagers sat on this, let's see, it was on this side, sat on this right side and would literally pack this entire section out. And then there was like the rest of the people. And it was very obvious. And one of the principles that we discovered along the way working with students that we needed in our lives, they needed, we need, is a principle from Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 29. I want you to see this verse on the screen with me. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Don't use any foul or abusive language, but let everything you say be good and helpful, or kind and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. We labeled this, we called it, and we've called it this for years, B and E. Build and edify. May the words of my mouth build and edify. If I'm going to talk about Chief Chuck, anybody in this room ever heard me talk about Chief Chuck, you've heard me build and edify. Anybody in this room that's ever heard me talk about this man, Sheriff Borders, has heard me build and edify him. I can say that. I know that because I've never said a cross word about this guy. I've done nothing but say words of encouragement. But I recognize he's a man who will make mistakes, just like I'm a man who will make mistakes, just like you are a person that will make mistakes. But may the words of my mouth be used to build, to edify, to be kind and encouraging, to build others up. See, if we could get that nailed down, now we start to eliminate one of our final four. Oftentimes in life, we think we're number one. That's how we live our lives. That's where pride comes in. Might be the number one seed. For those that are basketball people in here, you understand that language. If there's a number one seed in my whole tournament bracket, it might be pride. But coming real close is this thing of the tongue. The greatest example I could come up with to share with you on someone that demonstrated a good use of the tongue. See if you resonate with this. God has one Son, Jesus, sends Him to earth, leaves the beauty and splendor of heaven, comes here. It's a couple of thousand years ago. And Jesus lives for 33 years. What we know from Scripture is without sin, the only man to ever do it. Somewhere in the midst of His 33rd year of life on this planet, living a sinless, perfect life, a carpenter's son, a rabbi, educated, Jesus is falsely accused. Matter of fact, some of the accusations were actually true. You remember what one of the accusations was? That they wanted to crucify. If you're not familiar with why they crucified Jesus, let me share with you one of the claims they made. Here's what the Jewish people said, the rabbis said of their fellow rabbi. He claims to be God. And that goes against Jewish law. They call it blasphemy. And you know what the penalty for blasphemy is? Death. So when, on the night of Jesus' crucifixion, he's having a meal with his closest friends. It's called the Upper Room. Thank you, Elaine, for reminding me. We were just there a year ago this week. I was preaching in Israel. Next year, you want to go to Israel? We're going back next March. Looking forward to it. Good commercial there. Jesus is handed over by one of his closest friends, sold for some silver. Process this for a minute. I don't have the time to unpack what he went through, the flogging, the brutality of the killing measure that they took him through called the crucifixion. Come on Easter, we'll talk a little bit more about that on Easter. But think about it this way. The brutality, and it's every historian, including Scripture, verifies that this event took place. This isn't just a story narrative. This was an actual event in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. He's strapped to a post, and they wrap the whip around. The whole intent was to kill a man by removing the flesh and exposing the rib cage. That's the process of the crucifixion. The crucifixion, the end result was to nail him up and humiliate him. It wasn't to kill them on a cross. The process of the crucifixion was the murderous act. So here's kind of what happens. Jesus goes through all of this. He has survived the flogging. There's not a lot of flesh. Most writers, rabbinical writers, would say you couldn't even recognize him as a man, his body. You and I don't understand that. It's hard to comprehend other than, watching a Mel Gibson film on it. And so we get this mental image in our mind of what he would have gone through when he's finally stretched out on the cross and he begins to suffocate on the cross because of the way they've stretched him out, extended the body to where he can't breathe. As he pushes up with every breath, you remember there was a group of people down at the base of the cross making fun of him, and they start gambling with his clothes and all this stuff. Well, think about it. There's two thieves on both sides of the cross with him. Do you remember? I mean, there can't be a better illustration of this and this. If Jesus had a critical spirit and heart, it would have been the prime opportunity on the cross for him to do something like this. God, you see all these men and women in front of me? Take them out. There's no value there. I'm your son. Just obliterate them. But he didn't, did he? You remember what his famous words were? Looking to his Father, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. If nothing else, can my encouragement be to you? If today, tomorrow, Wednesday night, Thursday morning at the Bridge Club, whatever it is. Did somebody have a Bridge Club on Thursday? Okay. All right. At work, officer, fireman, first responder, mayor, pastor, construction, whatever your job is. When that moment this week starts to go down the road and somebody's going to be trash talked, and you know it's going to happen just because we talked about it today. So it's coming. The moment it happens, take the position that Jesus took. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Now, you don't have to look them in the eye. Hold on a second. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're saying. Don't wipe them out right now. Don't be ridiculous. But there's where a critical spirit, a judgmental spirit, when we have one, we just join in and start to criticize. It's a manifestation of a sick heart comes out on the tongue. Can you see it? I hope so. Because if we could eliminate this just in the body of Christ, can you imagine what our community would look like? That's the place every mayor would want to be. Everybody in the whole country would want to be the mayor of Leesburg, because when you go to Leesburg, man, that community talks well of each other. I mean, could you imagine? It almost sounds like fairy tale land. It doesn't have to be. You know why? Because who can lead this community? The church can. All we got to do is flex our muscle. Several thousand in our community call themselves Christians. So if the Christian community would just start to practice a less judgmental spirit, it would eliminate the gossip. I hope that's an encouragement and help to you. First responders, may our words today say to you and communicate to you a heart of gratitude. It's really what we wanted to do today. I got chill bumps thinking about it. This week, first responders had to work with me and my family. This week. In my community. There's been nighttime calls at my home that first responders have come to. There's been EMS come to my home since I've lived in my home. There's been fire trucks sitting in front of my driveway. My neighbors are like, dude, why do you have so many first responders at your home? I don't know. All I know is you're a blessing to this community. And no matter what you hear, and if it all goes in the tank tomorrow because of one bad act, know that there are a group of people that have been plotting for some time, called pastors, that we will flex and raise our muscle and raise the banner high and say, we support you. For all of our first responders in the room right now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to close and pray for you and your family. Can I do that, please? That'd be all right. Jesus, some of these men and women are my friends. Some I've never met until this day. Some I may never see again, and some I may encounter and engage with in the future. But I am so grateful for men and women that have decided to follow the pursuit and the passion of being a first responder. Our community needs them. We need them healthy. We need them to be in a position where they don't live in fear, but they live empowered, not to be idiots, but to be empowered to do their job well. And so, God, I thank you for them. And Lord, I lift up the communities around our country, like we mentioned earlier, Ferguson. Lord, I lift up that community. It is in turmoil today. They need you to intervene. I don't see a different solution. We're not going to be able to send in a politician to solve it. It's going to need a supernatural solve of the Spirit of God. So God, may leaders and community rally around the common cause of being an imitator of you. And Lord, in this community, I'm not so naive to think that the Christians are all the good people that are just going to do it. We have incredible people that aren't a part of the church in this community that we'd like to see become a part of the fellowship of the gospel. So God, may this community be a community that stands apart. As one pastor prayed 3 years ago when we began to pray, there is a black cloud over the Leesburg community, a cloud of oppression. And as we were praying 18 months ago, we began to see the clouds have broken and the Son of God has begun to shine through in this community. And for that we say, thank you, God. It's not because of a group of pastors or a group of people. It is because you have chosen to show favor on this community. So today we say thank you for all of our first responders. From the north end of our county to the south end of our county, from the east to the west, all the way into the Orlando community, all the way out to Sumter, all the way up past the villages. We know there's people that are drawn to this place from other communities that aren't just Lake County. So we say thank you for the men and women that serve. Would you protect them, please? God, I thank you for the times I've been able to ride with some of them. I thank you for the times that I've been able to be a part of some of the situations. And although my contribution is so minimal to theirs, God, I thank you for their contribution. May we leave this place today having a better feel, better understanding of how to deal with the symptom of gossip. It's simply a symptom of something much bigger, deeper, a root, a judgmental spirit, a heart condition. So may we deal with that today. And this week, may we find ourselves in every conversation building and edifying one another. And may we give you glory, not because of some pastor that preached it or some church that helped us to see it, but may we give you glory that your Spirit worked in us to reveal it. And I thank you today for what you've done in this place. In Christ's name, amen. Hey, before you...